They buried my drain under a mountain of snow, and when I locked it up, 85 houses up the hill started to panic. That is not an exaggeration. That is exactly how it played out. I'm Daniel Harper, 58, and I live at the very bottom of Ridgerest Hollow, a tidy little HOA tucked into the hills of western Massachusetts, and for a dozen years my house has been the quiet one down below. Older oaks leaning in like they're keeping secrets, a gravel drive, a porch that creaks the right way in the rain. From the back deck you look up and you see rows of new houses climbing the slope like neat stairs, vinyl siding, stainless grills, curtains that open at 11 on Saturday mornings. From up there you look down and you see my place, the one that was here before brochures and neighborhood names, and you don't see the culvert, a 24-inch concrete pipe with a steel grate half hidden by brush most summers. But that pipe is the reason all those houses sleep easy when the snow melts. Decades ago, the original farmer sold the upper acreage to a developer, and the town required a drainage easement across what is now my yard, recorded in 1981. It says they can route stormwater through that culvert as long as they maintain clear access and keep it unobstructed. Maintain clear access, that phrase, is going to matter like a punchline later because maintenance means prevention, not paperwork after everything's ruined. I bought the place after my wife passed. It was quiet, and I liked the quiet tomatoes on the stoop, old photographs in the attic, the kind of life that moves slow enough to notice birds. The first winters were ordinary snow, came plows, ran up top, neat white ridges, lined the roads, and the drains stayed clear. Last winter was different. We had storm after storm, heavy wet snow that clung to everything, and the HOA hired a new contractor from Albany with shiny trucks and wide steel blades that moved mountains. The first time I noticed something wrong, I was out back splitting wood and heard the scrape of metal up the hill, the long idle of a truck. Then a white wave crested the ridge and a deliberate dump of plowed snow slid into my yard like someone had tipped a glacier off the top of the world. I walked up as far as I could without trespassing and stopped a driver before he pulled away. "You can't dump that down here," I said. He shrugged. "We were told this is the designated runoff area." Designated by who? He pointed at the HOA signs like that explained the law of physics. Over the next few storms they did the same thing, plow the streets, pile the excess at the edge, let gravity do the rest. By mid-February there was a 12-foot mound sitting on top of my grate, a small glacier lounging in my backyard. I took pictures, not yet furious, just documenting the careless. Then thaw came. New England. Thaw doesn't ask nicely. It creeps in during the day, freezes at night, then comes back twice as thirsty. The mountain turned into a slow-leaking sponge water, pulling around the grate but not entering because ice and compacted snow had sealed the intake. I woke the next morning and felt cold seep under my boots an inch at first. Then it was an inch deeper, then another. I shut the furnace down when I saw water licking the base. That furnace was only 3 years old. I stood in the dimness of that basement with the hum gone and realized in the way you realize a tooth is rotten. When you bite into an apple, that being polite was not going to stop this. I called the HOA, President Victor Langley, who answered smooth as polished granite. Retired marketing exec, moves from Connecticut, treats the neighborhood like a brand rollout. "You can stop burying my drain," I told him. He paused, deciding if my problem was worth the day's agenda, then told me snow removal was the contractor's responsibility, and if there was an issue I should submit it in writing. That was the first time I felt dismissed. Public Works sent Karen Doyle, younger than Victor Sharp, efficient, someone who speaks in bullet points. She stood in my yard boots crunching, looked at the mound, and said aloud, "This is the most efficient location for snow storage. It's downhill." "And it also happens to be the only exit point for 85 homes," I replied. She folded her arms, looked at the grate, said it was structurally sound. My furnace was not. By March I had flooded 3 times. The second time I felt dismissed. The third time I felt resolve settle in my chest like a weight that belonged there. I'm not litigious. I ran a small construction business for 25 years, but I know what contracts mean and what it looks like when people count on you not reading the fine print. I dug out the file cabinet where I keep deeds and old inspections and pulled the 1981 easement, yellowed at the edges. The language was plain. The association agrees to maintain unobstructed access to the culvert and to prevent blockage of the intake structure. Prevent blockage, not respond to blockage. I read it 3 times. Then I started documenting everything. Wide shots of snow being pushed over the ridge, video of water sloshing uselessly against packed ice, photos of the basement floor with a tape measure in the frame, receipts for furnace estimates and dehumidifier rentals, and ruined boxes of family photographs. My wife at the beach, my parents in front of their first house, ink running, faces blurring. There's a certain smell when cardboard soaks too long, sour, stale, final. I requested a meeting. The HOA office is a small beige building near the clubhouse with motivational landscaping in there. Victor gestured for me to sit while Karen had a folder open, notes about me probably already penciled. Victor said the topography made downhill storage unavoidable. Karen pushed a map at me and mentioned costs for hauling. The cheaper option is to flood my house, I said, and the room went quiet. We're not responsible for acts of nature, Victor said, like snow was some sort of wandering beast. Snow is nature, I replied. But dumping it directly onto a recorded drainage easement is not nature, it's choice. I put the easement on the table and highlighted the lines. There it was, plain as a contract. Victor suggested I pursue damages through appropriate channels. That was the polite version of see you in court. But what he underestimated was that the person at the lowest point of the hill has choices too. That night I called an old friend, Marty Sullivan, who used to fabricate steel gates before he retired. Marty whistled low when I told him what I wanted: a heavy-duty steel grate, reinforced hinge brackets, a lock plate, something that could sit over the intake and be secured. You planning on keeping people out or keeping water in? He asked. Maybe both, I said. We measured the culvert next morning. Marty quoted $800. While he welded sparks in his dim shop, I drafted a precise letter, itemized damages, remediation costs, the cost to excavate the compacted mound, destroyed personal property, plus terms, immediate payment of the total, an annual maintenance fee for access, written snow disposal plans each winter, quarterly inspections, 15-year agreement, and a clause that any future intentional dumping would be a breach that could keep the drain sealed until compliance. It read like risk management, not extortion. We bolted the custom grate into place on a cold gray Tuesday. When it swung shut, it made a satisfying clang, and I posted a simple stake drain closed due to HOA easement violation. Then I sent the letter certified to Victor and Karen. Victor called, voice tightened. You can't unilaterally block critical infrastructure, he said. You did when you buried it, I replied. Extortion would be demanding money to solve a problem I created. I'm billing you for a problem you ignored. I told him spring melt was 6 weeks away, and without the culvert, those streets up there become shallow rivers. There's a clause in most insurance policies excluding flood damage from obstructed infrastructure. He might want to read it. Karen called the next day, measured strategic. They threatened legal remedies. Even the word eminent domain floated like a threat. I laughed. HOA boards aren't governments. They said they'd consult counsel. The grate stayed locked. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Word travels in neighborhoods. A few curious neighbors came to the edge of the slope to look down at the locked grate. The Ramirez family from 2 houses up brought coffee and said they had no idea the plows had been dumping snow down here. They thought it melted naturally. If that drain stays closed, are we really at risk? Mrs. Ramirez asked. Yes, I answered. Within a week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I walked into the clubhouse and folding chairs were filled. Tension hummed louder than the old soda machine. Victor, less polished, now announced discussions to resolve a drainage dispute. Someone in the back asked why they were hearing about it now. Victor slid his eyes to me and said I'd taken unilateral action. I stood up and said I acted after 3 floods and months of being ignored. The easement required unobstructed access, and it was obstructed repeatedly. The twist, if you want to call it that, wasn't a dramatic reveal so much as a shift in alliance. Karen, who had arrived in my yard with bullet points and efficiency, watched the spring, warm front roll in and the water start to find new paths. She called me Boots, sloshing through runoff, and for the first time, there was less policy and more human in her voice. This escalated quickly. It didn't have to, I said. Her posture changed not because I had been theatrical, but because the forecast put the threat into immediate terms. Victor's board felt pressure. 85 homeowners worrying about flooded streets are a persuasive lobby. After a flurry of lawyer emails and very uncomfortable board meetings, the HOA wired the total I'd billed and signed the 15-year maintenance contract 2 days before the warm front hit. No handshake photo, no grand apology, just numbers and signatures. They also agreed to excavate the mound immediately. That warm Sunday, you could feel the change in the air before you saw it. Soft southern wind, loosening the brittle cold icicles, dribbling the snowpack, sagging. Water started running in silver threads toward the slope, but the grate was locked. I stood at the edge of my yard and watched, like a man watching a test he'd warned about. Water pooled where it shouldn't, then spread, then phone calls started. Victor rang anxious. "Water is accumulating on Crestline Drive," he said. "What will it take to resolve this tonight?" I said it was never about tonight. It was about preventing next winter. They needed to remove the mound now, and I wanted written confirmation of new disposal plans before midnight and Karen in person to inspect before I'd unlock. They moved, lights came on up the hill. Trucks came back, crews loaded snow into beds instead of pushing it over the ridge. Karen arrived soggy and real, not bullet points. The crew carved the mound with an excavator under floodlights. The grate reemerged cold and unyielding. When I slid the key into the padlock, that brass felt heavier than it should have weight. From months of water under my floors, from ruined photos, from nights awake, listening for the furnace that had died. I turned it slow. The lock clicked open, and the grate swung with that same solid clang. Water surged forward and disappeared into the culvert like it had been waiting for permission. Ponds on Crestline Drive thinned, ripples smoothed, and you could almost hear the neighborhood exhale all the way down to my yard. Victor called 15 minutes later with a voice that sounded smaller. "The streets are clearing. For what it's worth," he added. "We should have handled this differently." Yes, you should have, I thought, but I didn't feel triumph more, a steady settling like a scale balancing back toward where it should be. The contract runs for 15 years now. The HOA wired the remediation, set up the annual maintenance fee, and they send me a snow management plan each fall that I review over coffee at the same kitchen table where I reread the easement. Marty still comes by with a wave. Karen still oversees public works. Victor is still president, though I suspect he reads agreements more carefully these days. The grate stays locked unless compliance is obvious, not as a threat, but as leverage earned the hard way. Sometimes I stand at the edge of the yard after a storm and watch plows work with a little distance. Trucks haul snow into beds not over the ridge, and there's a quiet that's different now. Quieter because there's accountability under it. If there's a lesson in this mess, it's not moralizing, it's a recognition. Infrastructure is invisible until it fails, and the person at the lowest point often carries the highest risk. Harmony without accountability is just quiet resentment, waiting for a warm front, and sometimes the price of keeping your house dry is being the one to make people uncomfortable enough to change. I didn't set out to fight my HOA. I didn't enjoy locking that grate. I would have preferred a phone call and an apology back in January. But when polite requests are met with polite dismissal, patience runs out like meltwater. So I'll leave you with this. Was I protecting my home, or did I overstep by holding an entire hillside accountable? Should an HOA be responsible for maintaining the systems it depends on, even if that responsibility rests on someone else's land? Or does the downslope neighbor just accept the water for the sake of community peace? I know where I stand, but I want to hear where you do. Tell me your take, and if you've ever been the person left holding the flood, share that story below.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.